They watch you, and it unsettles them. Not because you begged for their attention, not because you asked to be noticed, but because your existence, your growth, your survival, it threatens the fragile illusions they live in. Your power doesn't scream. It lingers, it moves in silence, and that silence rattles them more than any noise ever could. They pretend not to see you, but their eyes can't look away. Every step you take forward is a reminder of what they could never become, an envy. It eats at them like fire under their skin, making it harder and harder for them to breathe in a world where you refuse to stay small. Stay with me till the end of this video. Hit that subscribe button. And like this, if you feel the fire rising inside you, there are things you carry that no one else knows about. Scars that never made it to the surface. Nights where your chest felt too heavy to breathe. Mornings where the world demanded your strength when you had none left to give. They see you now and assume your composure means ease. They think your silence means you were untouched, that life somehow went easy on you. But inside, you know the truth. You know the miles you've walked with wounds no one ever treated, with storms you faced alone while everyone else turned away. That weight, it changed you. At first, it broke you down. It made you question your worth. It made you believe you were invisible, forgotten. But over time, something shifted. Carrying what felt unbearable forced you to grow roots deeper than anyone around you. The world could push, it could crush, it could tear pieces off you, but it couldn't uproot you. Because while they were distracted by noise, you were learning how to stand in silence. Silence became your training ground. The hours no one saw, the battles no one noticed, those weren't empty moments. They were shaping you into someone the world could no longer read. They gave you a kind of strength that isn't loud, isn't obvious, but is impossible to shake. People look at you now and wonder how you don't collapse. They don't understand the weight you've already carried. The invisible load that would have destroyed them if they had to bear even a fraction of it. You became your own anchor in a world that wanted you to drift away. And yes, it was lonely. Yes, it was brutal. But it's that very loneliness, that very brutality, that carved resilience into your bones. It taught you that strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the decision to rise with it strapped to your back, so when they doubt you now, when they try to measure your worth by what they see on the surface, they will always come up short. Because what defines you can't be seen. It lives in the weight you've carried quietly, in the battles you've endured without applause, in the scars no one clapped for. That silent weight didn't ruin you. It made you unshakable. And here's the truth. The heaviest parts of your story, the ones you never spoke of, became the very proof that nothing and no one could ever truly break you. That's why they'll never understand you. That's why they'll never be able to match your strength. There was a time when their words cut deep, when every look of dismissal, every whisper of doubt, every moment they turned their back on you, left scars that no one could see. You remember the feeling of being underestimated, watching them smirk as if you were nothing more than a failed attempt at becoming something greater. They thought their disbelief was the end of you. They thought rejection would silence you, that betrayal would collapse the ground you were standing on. And for a moment, maybe it did. For a moment, you believed them, but something dangerous was born in that moment of collapse. Because when they handed you their doubt, when they stacked rejection on your shoulders, they unknowingly gave you fuel. Every time they told you what you couldn't do, you stored it like firewood. Every betrayal became another spark. And while they laughed, you were building a furnace inside your chest. One they could never put out. That's the thing they never understood. When someone like you is pushed down, you don't just rise, you rise carrying the weight of their disbelief, turning it into energy they can't match. Doubt has a strange way of becoming power when you stop letting it define you and start letting it drive you. Rejection stopped being an ending. It became the very force that sharpened your will. Betrayal no longer shattered you. It revealed who never deserved a place beside you in the first place. Their underestimation, their smug certainty that you would never rise, that became your hidden weapon. Because while they were wasting energy tearing you down, you were fueling a transformation they could never stop. Every laugh at your expense, became the sound of your motivation. Every wall they built became a stair you climbed. And now, the very people who once doubted you watch in silence, unable to process how the same words that were meant to crush you are the reason you stand taller than ever. It's almost poetic, but not in the way they expected. They thought your failure would feed their pride. Instead, their doubt fed your fire. They thought their betrayal would end your story. Instead, it rewrote it into something untouchable. And now, when they look at you, they don't see the broken pieces they left behind. They see someone forged by fire they lit but could never control. They see the storm their own doubt created, and it terrifies them. Because deep down, they know the truth. If they had believed in you, they might have stood beside your greatness. But since they didn't, they were only fuel. And nothing burns hotter than that. For so long, you lived inside a mirror that wasn't even yours. Every step you took, every word you spoke, every dream you reached for, you measured it against the reflection of their opinions. Their judgment decided your worth. Their approval decided if you were enough. And every time they disapproved, every time they whispered you weren't capable, the mirror cracked a little more. But you still kept staring into it, hoping one day it would finally show you the version of yourself you wanted to see. The truth is, that mirror was never meant for you. It was built from their fear, their insecurity, their envy. You thought you were seeing yourself, but what you were really seeing was a distorted version shaped by people who never even understood you. And the longer you kept looking, the smaller you became. But there comes a moment. Maybe it comes after enough pain, maybe after enough silence, where you realize you're not living for yourself anymore. You're living inside their reflection. And in that moment, something shifts. You understand that the only way to breathe, the only way to stand in your own skin, is to shatter the mirror when you stop needing their validation. You start to see yourself with eyes that aren't clouded by judgment. You begin to realize your worth was never meant to be debated, never meant to be given or taken away by anyone else. It was always yours. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop letting their voices define your reality. It means you understand that their opinions are not truth, only noise. And once you see that, you become untouchable in a way that terrifies them. Because the power they had over you is gone. There's freedom in walking past people who once made you. Shrink in feeling no need to prove them wrong. There's strength in no longer chasing approval that was never going to fill you in the first place. That is where purpose begins. In the silence that follows the breaking of the mirror. You no longer exist as a reflection of their doubts. You exist as the truest version of yourself. And when you stand there, whole and unshaken, their opinions lose their grip. They may still talk, they may still judge, but none of it reaches you anymore. Because once you've shattered the mirror of their opinions, you no longer live for their gaze. You live for your own. And that kind of freedom is something they can never take back from you. There was a time when you wanted them to see you. You wanted their recognition, their approval, their applause. You wanted them to look at you and say you mattered. And when they didn't, when they turned their heads or laughed behind your back, it cut deep. It made you question if all your effort was worth anything at all. That need for recognition became a chain, one you carried without realizing how heavy it was. But something happens when you get tired of begging for scraps of validation. You begin to see how hollow their approval really is. You notice how quickly their applause turns to silence, how easily their attention shifts to the next distraction. And you start to ask yourself, why am I living to be noticed by people who can barely hold their own lives together? That's when the transformation begins. You stop chasing their eyes, and you start chasing your own standard. You no longer measure yourself by the noise of the crowd, but by the weight of your own progress. And in that shift, something ignites inside you. A fire that burns without needing their recognition to keep it alive. This fire makes you unreachable. Not because you've left the world, but because you've risen above the games they play. Their envy grows, but it can't touch you. Their gossip spreads, but it doesn't reach you. Their silence, their rejection, their attempts to pull you down, none of it matters anymore. Because you no longer live for them. You live for something far deeper, something they can't give and can't take away. They see you now, standing taller, quieter, yet more powerful than ever, and it unsettles them, because you're no longer within their reach. You're no longer controlled by their praise or their hate. You've stepped into a place where their envy burns hotter each day. But the flames never rise high enough to scar you. That is the fire of becoming unreachable. It's not about disappearing. It's about elevating. It's about building yourself to such a height that their words can't climb. Their jealousy can't follow. Their doubt can't hold you down anymore. And the truth is, once you taste that freedom, you never go back. You no longer crave recognition because you've recognized yourself. You no longer fear envy because it has no power here. You no longer bend to the noise of the crowd because you've learned to stand in your own silence. And in that silence, you are unshakable. When you rise like this, they will keep reaching. They will keep burning with envy. But you will already be gone, untouchable, unreachable, and completely free. Pain changes you. At first, it feels like it takes everything from you, your balance, your trust, your sense of control. Betrayal rips holes in the places you thought were safe. Failure drags you into shadows that feel endless. Heartbreak makes you question if you'll ever be whole again. And in those moments, you don't feel strong. You feel broken, scattered, reduced to pieces, too sharp to hold without cutting yourself. But here's what they don't see. Pain doesn't just break you, it shapes you. Every wound that tore you open was also carving something into you. At first, it looked like scars, but over time, those scars became steel. The very things that hurt you the most became the raw material for a weapon you never asked for, but learned to build. Think about it. Heartbreak that hollowed you also taught you how to endure emptiness without losing yourself. The betrayal that burned you taught you how to see truth in a way that liars never can. The failures that crushed you gave you lessons sharper than any victory could. Piece by piece, every cut, every fall, every loss was sharpening you. And now, what was once just pain has become a blade. Not the kind that lashes out recklessly, but the kind you hold with precision. You learned how to wield it, how to use the strength that came from suffering without letting it consume you. That's what makes it powerful. The blade is forged from your pain, but it is guided by your control. They can't take it from you because they never carried it. They can't use it against you because they never survived what you did to make it. That's what makes it yours alone. When they try to break you again, they don't realize they're only handing you more steel to sharpen with. The truth is, you don't wish for pain, but you no longer fear it, because you understand that nothing thrown at you is wasted. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every failure adds another edge to the weapon you carry within. And while others are weakened by the same storms, you're strengthened. So when they look at you now and wonder how you still rise, how you still fight, how you still move forward after everything, they'll never understand. Because they were hoping pain would destroy you. Instead, it became the very thing that made you unstoppable. Pain is no longer your enemy. It's the blade in your hand, the weapon you forged, the strength you own. And the most dangerous part? It's a weapon they will never be able to hold. There comes a moment in your life when the noise around you becomes unbearable. Everyone has something to say. Everyone thinks they know who you are, what you should do, and where you should go. And for a long time, you let their voices wrap around you like chains. You let their presence trick you into believing you needed them, that without their approval, without their company, you were nothing. But then the day comes when the weight of it all suffocates you. And in that suffocation, you find something you never expected, the raw truth that the only person you can never afford to abandon is yourself. Standing alone is not easy. It feels like walking into a storm without armor. The silence cuts deeper than words. The empty spaces where people once stood echo in your mind. You ask yourself if you're strong enough to carry the weight of your own life without leaning on anyone else. And in that question, fear rises. Because what if you fall? What if you're not enough? But here's the reality you uncover. Falling apart only happens when your identity is borrowed. When you've built yourself on the approval of others, solitude feels like destruction. Yet when you begin to strip all of that away, and you start walking with only your own shadow as company, you realize something profound. You're still breathing. You're still moving. You're still here, and that's when the shift begins. That's when you notice how many people around you can't even spend an hour alone with themselves. They run to crowds, to noise, to endless distractions, because silence terrifies them. They fear what they might find when there's no one else to perform for. But you're different. You face it. You sit in the silence. You let the loneliness break you open. And instead of collapsing, you grow sharper, clearer, stronger. Do you know what that makes you? Dangerous. Because true independence is rare. To stand alone and not crumble is a power that unsettles everyone who has built their worth on the crowd. When they see you walking with no one beside you, yet not trembling, not begging, not bending, it rattles them to the core. It shows them a truth they're too afraid to face. That strength has nothing to do with numbers. This is where you rise beyond their reach. Alone, but not empty. Alone, but not broken. Alone, but carrying something most will never touch, self-possession. The kind of strength that doesn't vanish when people leave. The kind of power that isn't shaken when the crowd turns its back. So yes, solitude may feel cold. It may feel quiet, but it is in that quiet where you finally hear your own voice. And once you learn to stand in that silence without collapsing, you'll never again be at the mercy of anyone else's presence. That's the paradox they'll never understand. When you can stand alone without falling apart, you no longer need anyone, yet everyone needs you. There comes a moment when you realize they can't touch you anymore. Not because they stopped trying, not because they lost interest, but because you've risen into a place they can no longer reach. You've outgrown the cage they once built for you. And what's terrifying for them is that the old version of you, the one they could manipulate, the one they could control, the one they could break, no longer exists. You remember what it felt like, don't you? Their words sinking into your chest like knives. Their judgment shaping the way you walked, the way you spoke, the way you saw yourself. You carried their weight like it was your own. Every sneer, every dismissal, every time they tried to define you, you wore it as truth. That's what nearly destroyed you. But here's the thing they never expected. Pain has a way of forcing you into evolution. What tried to crush you didn't just scar you, it remade you. It turned you into something sharper, something stronger, something unrecognizable to the version of you that once bowed under their gaze. And now, when they look at you, they don't see the same person. They see someone who walked through fire and came out carrying the flames. They see someone who took every wound, every betrayal, every disappointment, and forged it into armor. And the truth that unsettles them most is that there is no going back. You cannot be undone. Understand this. True transformation is permanent. Once you stop living for their recognition, once you stop bleeding for their approval, there is no reversing it. You've stepped into a place of self-possession that no envy, no rumor, no whispered insult can penetrate. They can throw stones from a distance, but none of it reaches you. They're shouting at a ghost because the person they once knew is gone. And yet here's the beautiful twist. This was never about revenge. It was never about proving them wrong. Revenge keeps you tied to the same battlefield, chained to the same noise. What you've built goes far beyond that. You didn't rise to destroy them. You rose to free yourself. And freedom is the one thing they can't stand to watch, because while they're still tangled in their bitterness, still clinging to the old stories, still trying to drag you back into the version of yourself they preferred, you've already moved on. You're operating in a higher space where their envy is nothing but background noise. And that's what eats them alive. The fact that their power over you has evaporated, and all they can do now is watch. That is the transformation they can't undo. They can't drag you back into smallness. They can't chain you to their shallow vision of who you're supposed to be. They can't reach the place you now stand, a place built out of every tear, every scar, every lonely night you thought would break you. You've become unreachable not because you escaped pain, but because you turned it into the foundation of your strength, and now you don't carry their names, their voices, or their judgments inside you anymore. You carry yourself. You carry the fire of your own becoming. And once you touch that level of power, there's no returning to weakness. So let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them choke on the envy that rises every time they see you stand taller. Because deep down, they know the truth. You are no longer theirs to break. You belong to yourself now. That is your final evolution. That is your untouchable state. And nothing they do, nothing they say, nothing they ever attempt will undo the transformation that saved you. They laughed when you fell. They whispered when you broke. They even placed bets, counting the days until you'd disappear for good. To them, your pain was entertainment. Your silence was proof you were finished. But what they never saw was the storm you were becoming in the shadows. Every wound was fire, every scar was armor, every betrayal a new reason to rise. And now, while they sit, empty-handed, drained, and bitter, you are still standing, untouchable, unshaken, unbroken. This isn't just a story of survival. It's the kind of resurrection they swore would never happen. Stay until the end of this video. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it right now. Betrayal doesn't just cut you once, it lingers. It seeps into your skin, it crawls into your chest. It rewrites the way you see people. It's the way you see trust, the way you see yourself. The moment you realize someone you trusted, someone you let close, someone you believed in was secretly sharpening a knife behind your back, something inside you dies. And what hurts the most is not the knife itself. It's the memory of every moment you believed their smile was real. Every word you thought carried truth. You sit there asking yourself, how could they? How could they look me in the eyes and still bury me when I wasn't looking? You replay conversations. You replay promises. And you feel stupid. You feel weak. You feel like the fool who handed over your heart, your loyalty, your faith, only to watch it get crushed in their hands. That shame, that humiliation, it burns. And in those first days, it feels like it might consume you whole. But betrayal has a strange way of showing you who you really are. Because when the dust settles, when the screaming in your chest turns into silence, you begin to see something else. You begin to see that maybe the fire they lit inside you isn't just pain. Maybe it's fuel. You start to realize that every time they mocked you behind closed doors, every time they celebrated your downfall, every time they whispered that you would never rise again, they were giving you a gift. Not the kind you asked for, not the kind you wanted, but the kind that forces you to grow teeth, to grow armor, to grow into someone who doesn't beg for loyalty, who doesn't collapse when trust breaks, who doesn't surrender just because the people you love turned against you. The truth is, betrayal unmasks people. It shows you their weakness. It shows you their fear. Because the only reason they had to break you was that they were terrified of what you could become if you weren't broken. They couldn't stop your growth, so they tried to poison your roots. They couldn't stand your light, so they tried to dim it in secret. And yes, it hurt. Yes, it almost destroyed you. But it didn't. You're still here. And now you carry something they don't. The fire of humiliation turned into strength. The weight of betrayal, heavy as it is, can either chain you down or sharpen you into steel. Think about it. If they had never betrayed you, would you have learned how strong you could be when left with nothing but ashes? If they had never doubted you, would you have learned how to build yourself in silence, without applause, without support, without anyone to hold your hand? The wound they left behind was never meant to heal you softly. It was meant to scar you into something unrecognizable, something stronger, something untouchable. You don't just survive betrayal. You absorb it. You bend it. You turn it into a blade they can no longer use against you. So let them whisper. Let them laugh. Let them choke on the story they wrote for you. Because the truth is, you are not their victim. You are their consequence. And the fire they thought would destroy you is the same fire that will burn in your eyes when you rise. And they finally realize they created the very monster they feared all along. Silence can feel like a coffin. When the voices disappear, when the room empties, when nobody checks if you're breathing, you start to believe you've been buried alive. The people you thought would stand with you vanish. The noise of support fades. until the only sound left is your own heartbeat echoing in a room that feels too big for one person. That kind of silence hurts. It convinces you that you don't matter, that maybe they were right to walk away, maybe you were never enough to begin with. But silence isn't only emptiness, it's also space. It's the raw, unshaped ground where you begin to rebuild without interference. In silence, you're forced to hear things you could once drown out: the doubts, the anger, the hunger, the unspoken dreams. At first, it feels unbearable, like being trapped with a voice you want to escape. But then, slowly, something shifts. You realize those whispers are not there to break you. They are there to guide you in shadows. No one is watching. That means no one is interrupting. No one is measuring your progress, mocking your mistakes, or trying to hold you back. You're left with the chance to create in secret, to strengthen without distraction, to sharpen edges in the dark that no one even knows exist. What feels like exile becomes training. What feels like punishment becomes preparation. Isolation reveals something your enemies can't touch, the part of you that doesn't need applause, doesn't need validation, doesn't need anyone to say you're worthy. You begin to understand that silence is not weakness, it's protection. It's where the foundation of power is laid, brick by brick in the dark. And when you're done building, when the silence has done its work, you step out, not fragile, but unstoppable. The irony is those who buried you in silence thought they were killing your voice. They thought the absence of noise would be the end of you. But what they never considered is that silence teaches you to create your own rhythm, your own sound, your own thunder. And when you finally return, you don't need their approval, their claps, their recognition. You move with a strength they can't predict, because they never saw what was happening in the shadows. So if you feel alone right now, if you feel forgotten, if you feel like the silence is choking you, know this: silence is not the end. It is the forge. It is the hidden place where you are being shaped into something they will never see coming. The silence you once feared will become the very reason you rise louder than ever before. Because silence doesn't bury you. It builds you. And when the shadows finally release you, you won't just return. You'll arrive as someone they can't measure, can't control, and can't stop. Rock bottom. Those words sound final, like a dead end. Like you've fallen so far, there's no way back, no light above, no path forward. When you're lying in the ruins of everything you thought you had, your pride shattered, your trust broken, your hope bleeding out, it feels like the story is over. You can barely breathe under the weight of what's been destroyed. Every dream feels like rubble, every plan turned to dust. And you ask yourself, what's left? What's the point of standing when everything you stood for has already collapsed? But here's the truth you only learn in that darkness. Rock bottom is not the grave. It's the forge. The ruins don't exist to bury you. They exist to strip you bare. To take everything false, fragile, and temporary away from you, so that only the core remains. And that core, though you may not see it yet, is unbreakable. When everything around you burns down, you discover what fire can really do. Fire doesn't only destroy. It purifies. It melts away illusions. It forces you to confront who you really are without the layers you used to hide behind. At rock bottom, you have no mask left, no shield, no comfort. But in that raw exposure, you also discover something terrifying and beautiful, the chance to rebuild yourself. Not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be. Look at the ruins around you. Yes, they're painful reminders. Yes, they carry scars of betrayal, failure, and disappointment. But they are also the foundation. You're not standing in emptiness. You're standing in a place where nothing false survived. And that's where true strength is born. Because anything you build here, in this wasteland, will be built to last. The fire in the ruins is not just outside you. It's inside you. The anger, the grief, the shame, they are fuel. They are energy. They are the spark that says, I refuse to stay buried. That's what they never tell you about destruction. It awakens hunger. Hunger for truth. Hunger for power. Hunger to prove that you are more than what collapsed. And when you listen to that hunger, when you let the fire consume what no longer serves you, something new rises from the ashes, not fragile, not naive, but forged. You will not walk out of these ruins the same person who entered them. That version of you is gone. What comes next is stronger, colder, sharper, and the people who doubted you, who celebrated your fall, who thought rock bottom was your ending, they will never understand that they were only helping you discover the part of yourself that cannot be destroyed. Rock bottom is not where your story ends. It's where the real story begins. Because when you rise from ruins, you rise untouchable. Not because the world suddenly got kinder, but because you became the fire they can no longer extinguish.